Timothy and Tracy Ferriter moved their family from Arizona to Jupiter, Florida. They bought a nice home in a wonderful neighborhood. Inside, they shared the home with 3 of their children. But the 4th child did not sleep inside the home. He slept in an 8x8 structure that was built inside their garage. It had a mattress, a desk, a camera, and a bucket. They say they did it for safety reasons. Their son was acting out, and they were afraid he might harm the other children. Now, Timothy and Tracy are facing child abuse charges. Meanwhile, in Michigan, Jennifer and James Crumbley were also dealing with a son who was getting into trouble. But the Crumbleys did not lock up their son. They bought him a gun and did not tell his school administrators. Their son then murdered 4 other students and wounded 7 others. And now Jennifer and James are facing homicide charges for what they did and for what they did not do. Tonight, we take a look at these cases as we investigate the role of parents and the choices they make in dealing with their troubled children. I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. And let me tell you, my social media, direct messages, everything has been blowing up as we watch this case involving the Ferriters, Timothy Ferriter, on trial for locking his son in that 8x8 structure in the garage. His wife will be on trial later. But many strong opinions, and the opinions coming from different directions. People who have been in similar situations as the Ferriters have been in, and trying to make the world understand what it's like to be in that position and how desperate and how dangerous it can be when you have a child who is acting like that. And then the other outrage from other parents. But these are certainly stories that hit home for those of us who are parents, and really for anyone. Now, let's start with the Oxford school shooter. This was a troubled kid. I mean, this is a kid who's hearing voices. This is a kid who's drawing pictures, violent pictures, lots of problems. And the degree or the level of the problems was pretty severe, pretty severe. I mean, once you start hallucinating and hearing voices and talking about it and trying and asking for help, I mean, as a child, that's unusual. Rarely do they ask for help. But this was a kid who had problems, real problems. And it seems that his parents didn't do much at all to really treat those problems, but they didn't punish him. They didn't lock him up. They've been charged for not really stopping him and helping him along the way. I mean, they're the ones who purchased the gun. He's a school shooter, killed 4 people, wounded 7 others. His parents, first parents of a school shooter that will ever come into court charged in homicide charges. I mean, he's already done, Ethan. He pleaded guilty. He's done, the school shooter. But now it's the parents. And tonight, we're looking at how parents react when they have a child who's a problem child, who has issues. And all kids go through something at some point. But here we're talking about elevated extreme levels and what the reaction of the parents is. Because we've got cases where parents are getting charged, and it's the way that they handled the situation that they were in. And in the case of the Crumbleys, it seems they did very little and actually enabled some more of that and kind of swept some stuff under the rug and didn't do anything to address what seemed to be indications that this child could be very violent or had these thoughts in his head. They did very little. They get charged. Now, let's talk about Tracy and Tim Ferriter. Their teenage son is acting out. And he's a troubled child. He got on the witness stand and he told the jury about the things that he was doing. And some of them involved violence. Now, there are more allegations that they have against their son, things that he was allegedly doing that the judge is not going to permit the jury to hear in the case. However, It's part of their basis for reacting the way they did. Now, they believe they have a son who is violent, who is potentially dangerous to the other people in the household, especially at night. And that's their explanation. And that's their reasoning for doing what they did. And what they did was build this 8x8 structure. Prosecutors calling it a box. Put it in the garage. And the parents are charged for locking him in that structure. Whether you want to call it a room, a box, a prison, whatever you want to call it. The jury will have to decide whether that was justified, was okay, was child abuse or not abuse. But again, this is another situation where you have parents who have a child who they believe is out of control and is potentially dangerous and is doing things and saying things and drawing things that they're concerned about, and they're concerned primarily for the safety of the rest of the children in the house. And they may say they're worried about the safety of everyone, of him getting out at night. I don't know. We'll see if he testifies. Timothy Ferriter. So you see in these two stories, there's some parallels, but then there's some major differences. But at the end, in both situations, the parents have been charged criminally, which means we're saying, no, this was the wrong way to handle that situation. And they handled them completely differently. Completely differently. In one case, they're locking the kid up, not letting him out, keeping everybody safe in their household. In the other case, they're doing very little. They're taking him to the shooting range, and they're sort of ignoring his pictures and everything else, and not telling anybody that he may have access to a gun. So that's what we're dealing with tonight. So let's begin with the trial and the case that you're watching here on Court TV. And as I said, this young man, who's the adopted son of Timothy and Tracy Ferriter, testified and told the jury about some of the things that he was doing. And other witnesses have come forward and talked about the behavior of this teenaged boy. Let's take a listen.
Came into my classroom and asked if he could make an announcement to my class. So he walked to the front of the class and started to say things where I quickly realized he was not sent by another teacher. He said some things to humiliate her in front of the whole class.
There was an incident in the pool where, you know, would be overly aggressive, duck the children underwater and hold them down there for a little bit and so on and so forth. So, yeah, but I mean, I was there, so I was there to protect and look after them, but I wouldn't have left my children alone if it was just the kids. We noticed there were knives missing from the kitchen, so we started to look for those to make sure we put those back and find out where they were. We couldn't find them, and then Tracy went into bag to have a look and found the knives and brought them back, and we put those away. So there was probably a handful of knives that were missing and found in bag.
Do you remember kicking a ball at another student repeatedly?
Do you have a name for the student?
I don't.
I think I do, yes.
Okay. Do you remember putting your finger and thumb and pushing up on a boy's throat and pushing him up against the wall at Immaculate Heart?
Yes.
I think you brought a box cutter to school?
Yes, that was at Basis Charter Schools.
Oh, that was at Basis? How did your parents respond to that?
They locked me in my room.
So there's more alleged bad behavior that will likely not end up in front of the jury in the trial, but is part of what Timothy and Tracy Ferriter have alleged in court papers. You've got that he pushed a female relative so hard that she fractured her shoulder, attacked that same female relative by pushing her face into a marble windowsill, tortured animals, brings knives to school and draws pictures of artillery, roams the house at night terrorizing others, fantasizes about killing people, dropped a heavy wooden door on a pregnant relative, searched the internet for disturbing ways to die, and stole money from a collection plate at church. So that is, those are some of the allegations and this behavior. So the parents are put into this situation. This is the child we have. This is what we are dealing with. You know, what are we supposed to do? How do we react to this? Well, the reaction to that is what this trial is about, the actions of the Ferriters. Let's take a listen again to their teenage adopted son, the victim in the case, outlining what happened to him as a result of his behavior.
Did you like being in that room?
No.
Did you want to be in the room?
No.
How did it make you feel?
To me, being locked in a room, it's dehumanizing. It's almost as bad as genocide.
Did the bed have a bed frame, or what was it like?
The bed had no frame, had no box spring. It was just a mattress on the floor.
Okay. And mattress on the floor, what size of mattress was it?
Size of the mattress was a twin size.
Now, did the room have any windows or any outside light?
No, it only had an air conditioner.
Okay. Let's talk about that air conditioner for a second. Were you allowed to touch or operate the air conditioner?
No.
Were you allowed to turn it on if you were hot or turn it off if you were too cold?
No.
Would you get in trouble if you touched the air conditioner at all?
Yes.
And who did that direction come from?
Tim.
If you had to use the bucket at that point, or sometime during the previous night, what would happen?
I would dump it into the bushes behind the house.
At school, would you get lunch?
No, I brought lunch.
Who made that lunch?
Tracy.
And what would be in that lunch?
A plain peanut butter sandwich. Either some sort of chips and a fruit.
Would you be allowed to, if you wanted to buy extra snacks at school?
No.
Were you allowed to have any more snacks than what was given to you in your lunch?
No.
Were you allowed to buy a school lunch?
No.
What time would you get home from school?
Around 3:30.
And then when you would get home from school on most days, what would happen?
I'd be put back into my room.
Okay. And when you say put back into the room, are you locked in the room?
Yes.
Let's bring in our experts, our guests tonight. We've got a great panel. In St. Louis, Missouri, licensed mental health and nationally certified clinician specializing in trauma, child abuse, and neglect, Sharonda Brown is with us. In Ann Arbor, Michigan, clinical psychologist and expert witness in the case of the Oxford school shooter, Dr. Colin King. In Los Angeles, California, clinical and forensic neuropsychologist and associate professor at Pepperdine University, Dr. Judy Ho. And also in Los Angeles, California, forensic psychiatrist, trial expert, witness, and columnist, Dr. Carol Lieberman. Great to see everyone tonight. Here's the first thing, and I look at this, Sharonda, I'll begin with you. If the child was not acting out, to me it's clear that these parents would not have built the 8x8 box structure in the garage. So there's obviously something going on. I'm getting direct messages left and right from people who've experienced similar circumstances with adoptions and children that are suffering from whatever these children are suffering from, this RAD, and they say, you have no idea what it's like. You don't know what it's like. That's what I'm hearing, okay? So with that in mind, you know, you have a case in the Oxford school shooter where the parents do nothing, they end up charged. These parents are doing something. So what's going on here?
I think there are two ends of the spectrum here. I believe that people who are aggressors are made. Murderers are made. You have some people who are enablers, and then you have some people who are aggressive themselves, so they operate in a state of aggression. Abuse is an addictive behavior. So when you have one set of parents that's saying, I'm going to put this child in a box, most likely these parents are more prone to abusive behaviors because before they were parents, they were people. And as people, they may handle a lot of conflict aggressively. Whereas another set of parents may not have an aggressive style of conflict. They may be more passive in their efforts, and they don't want conflict from their children. but so they may not do anything but enable the child because they don't want the conflict or they don't want to hear his voice or hear his tantrums. You see this a lot of times with children who have temper tantrums. If they're 3 and 4, you'll see the parents will give in to them to stop the tantrums, whereas you see other parents may spank the child to stop the tantrum. But what we have to realize is that aggression increases aggression, and passive behaviors, well, of course, it increases the defiant behaviors, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Dr. Colin King, I think one of the lines we're straddling here is trying to figure out where is the line for safety, discipline versus punishment, right? Those are 3 different things. Safety, trying to keep my family safe. Discipline, you act out, you're going to get punished. And then just straight punishment because there's some sort of thing in the back of your mind where you are sadistic. What do you think's going on here with this 8x8 box?
So those are all, you know, what you're describing is a very challenging situation. I've had the opportunity to evaluate a number of such parents as well as a number of such children and their hard choices. What I see emerging, I see a troubled kid being parented by a troubled parent. And that parent quite often is looking for solutions. So some may take the tack that I'm going to be uninvolved as much as I can and try to find solace elsewhere. Others, like in this case, decided, I'm going to make a statement, I'm going to do something, I'm going to lock this kid in a box, and hopefully, magically, it will teach him a lesson. And somehow he's going to be reformed. Now, clearly, that did not work very well. That parent or those parents needed a whole lot of help, but unfortunately, apparently, never got the help.
I want to, Dr. Judy Hell, when you think about what happened here, to me, it's clear. It's not just going to be a little bit of this or that that's happening that creates this level of response. So where on earth does that line, where does it come from in someone's mind that this is the solution, right? How desperate are you, or is there a level of, are you sadistic? You know what I mean? I'm trying to figure out, like, you adopted 2 children, which means you wanted children in your lives. Like, it's a big responsibility. It's a big cost. There's a lot of payback, obviously. But like, how do we get there from like, all right, child has problems and this is the solution, or is there something else at play in all of this?
I totally understand your confusion about this, Vinny. Like, how could this get to this point? And it didn't happen overnight. This is something that escalated slowly. And I know that at least the defense attorney's position was Timothy and Tracy were trying to get help. We're trying to go to doctors. We're trying to talk to the schools, and they just couldn't get the support that they need. I know that that's their position. But this locked room situation did not happen overnight. It was through a series of events and situations where they started to inch closer and closer and closer to that line of abuse. Then it was gross abuse, then it was severe abuse and mistreatment, no matter what the intention is. And I also want to remind everybody that the adoption system is very rigorous. So when you want to have your children biologically, there's no system. You can just have your children. But when you want to adopt, you have to go through a myriad of interviews with social workers. You have to be evaluated by a psychologist or a psychiatrist. You have to be deemed okay to be parents, to be good parents. And so somehow these parents pass those tests, presumably. And yet this is a situation that we find them in. And so I don't know where that communication breakdown was. I know that their position is that they try to get help. So I would like to see, where did we go wrong? Where did they actually try to get help? Were they completely rejected outright? Were they told they couldn't get the assistance that they needed and this is their last resort? But what's really odd too is that they said this wasn't a big secret. Even family members and friends have seen this room. And another question I have is, why did RF go into the room every day? Wasn't there a struggle there? He's getting bigger, he's getting stronger. Was there physical altercations to force him into the room? I mean, I have so many questions about this case, Vinny, but certainly this did not happen overnight.
Dr. Carol Lieberman, what do parents do? right? If you're legitimately concerned for the safety of the children in your household, and he's wandering around at night, and he's already thrown a door at a pregnant member of the family, has grabbed a kid's throat at work, is obsessed with knives, what do you do? How do you keep everyone safe?
Well, first of all, this is a problem that actually is more widespread than many people realize. Yes, you know, you need to go through all those checks and balances if you want to adopt a child in America. But they adopted this child from Vietnam, and I'm familiar with similar cases where children are adopted from Russia. And they develop in these orphanages where they start out, they develop reactive attachment disorder, meaning that they're in an institution where they're not getting nurturing, where they're being abused and or neglected. And so by the time a parent gets them here in America or wherever they get adopted to, it is already inborn in a sense, and it's instilled in them by that point because they're so young when they start getting all of this abuse and neglect. And so they're afraid to attach to a parent, an adoptive parent, because they're afraid that this parent is going to abuse them, neglect them as well. So, of course, the treatment for this is the very opposite of what the Ferriters are doing. The treatment for it, and it is very hard. You know, I've known lots of families who have lost all their savings trying to get help, you know, putting the child in a psychiatric hospital, which, you know, also has its complications because in some ways that resembles the institution that they originally started out in. So it is very difficult, but the treatment is to be the opposite of what the Ferriters are doing, to be consistent in nurturance and all of that from the very beginning. And, you know, and of course, then there's the disappointment that the adopted child isn't, you know, who you thought they were going to be or, you know, being able to exchange love with you in the way that you wanted it to be. So then there's some anger that builds up. Now, you know, I was feeling a little more sympathetic towards them until I heard some of these conversations that they've been playing, you know, the camera in the room, in the box, where the father really does sound sadistic. You know, he's enjoying, you can tell that he's enjoying telling him all of these things or not letting him do things, or, I mean, that's where it goes over the edge. And I find it impossible to believe that they couldn't have gotten some help before now.
All right, our guests are staying with us. When we come back, we'll talk about the other parents who did very little, the Crumbleys, parents of the Oxford school shooter. Plus, coming up next hour. In Sarasota, Florida, Maya Kowalski was separated from her parents after the hospital suspected her parents of medically abusing their daughter. They were wrong. And tonight, we hear from Maya as she describes what she went through after being taken from her parents and misdiagnosed by the hospital.
They claimed that I never asked to speak to my mom. I was doing fine. I was okay in my room. I hadn't had any questions about why my parents weren't allowed to see me. And that infuriated me so much because all I did for days on end was demand to speak to my parents. That's all I wanted to do.
The Florida father accused of locking his son in a box in the garage with a bed, a bucket, and a camera.
He was locked in a room for hours at a time.
Police say this abuse went unnoticed for years.
There are ring videos that the state provided of the child lying. He faces up to 40 years.
I'm not sure they're going to be able to justify it. What's going on in this house?
The Boy in a Box trial. Live coverage weekday mornings at 8/7 Central on Court TV.
True on November 30th, 2021, that all crimes were carried out while you possessed and used the 9mm handgun? Yes. Is it true that the firearm that you used on November the 30th was purchased on November the 26th, 2021 by your father, James Crumbley? Yes. Is it true that you asked him to buy the firearm? Yes. Is it true that you gave him your own money to buy the firearm? Yes. Is it true that you picked that gun up to buy? Yes. Is it true on November the 30th, 2021, When you obtained the firearm, it was not kept in a locked container or a safe.
Yes, it was not locked.
The Oxford school shooter murdered 4, 7 others were harmed in all of that. Couldn't purchase the gun himself. Gun was purchased by his parents for him, yet he had been suffering from mental issues. I mean, what's going on here? Take a listen to the prosecutor here describing the actions of the Oxford school shooter's parents prior to him acting out and committing these murders.
Your Honor, we know from the facts and that were presented at the swear-to that Mr. Crumbley purchased this weapon for his son, and that on the 27th, Mrs. Crumbley went to the shooting range with her son, posted on social media saying that it was a Mother's Sunday and that she bought a weapon for her, a gun for her baby for Christmas. It's also clear from the facts that he had total access to this weapon and that it was for him. Second, on the 29th, both defendants were aware that he was searching ammunition on his phone at school. Instead of reacting to that as a concerned parent and worried about safety, Mrs. Crumbley texted, LOL, I'm not mad, just next time don't get caught. And then obviously on this very tragic day, on the 30th, they were called to the school and about their son's drawing, which clearly depicted threats and acts of violence. And instead of disclosing to the school that he had full access to this weapon, they chose not to. They chose not to take their son home. They chose not to tell anybody that he might be dangerous when it was clear and they had every likelihood that he was. And instead they left. Furthermore, after the active shooting announcement went out, Mrs. Crumbley texted her son, Ethan, don't do it. And Mr. Crumbley went to his home purposely to search for this weapon because he was afraid his son had the weapon and was in fact shooting people and hurting them, which, as we know, is exactly what happened.
So you hear what the prosecutor's saying here is that they knew something was going on. They knew he had access to a gun, but then as soon as they heard that there was a school shooter that day, they're like, oh my goodness, texting him, don't do it, and then going, looking to see if the gun is still at home. Like, you realize something was wrong here. And this is, the parents didn't do anything other than, it seems, purchase him a gun. Let's bring back in our guests, Sharonda Brown, Dr. Colin King, Dr. Judy Ho, Dr. Carol Lieberman. Dr. Judy Ho, I'll begin with you. These parents, these drawings that we saw, I know we're all looking at it in retrospect, but the teacher that saw these was alarmed by him, which is why there was a conference at school. Yet nobody else seemed to be, including the parents who knew they had purchased a gun for him.
This is one of those situations yet again where you see these parents and you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but when something this tragic happens, then it's like, well, how much benefit of the doubt can we give them? We understand that this child was troubled, but there were so many signs leading up to what had happened. And there were signs that he was having violent thoughts, right? This is not just, okay, well, I think my child might be a little anxious and we need to get him some help. This is an escalation that they saw over time where he's talking about hearing voices. He's saying, help me. Even the morning of the shooting, he's drawing this picture. It seems like there's some level where he recognizes, I really, really need help. And he was crying out for help. So why was it that the parents thought that getting a gun would be the right thing in this scenario? They know that this child had violent thoughts. And I don't know if sometimes parents and even teachers or other people who are observing this in real time are just thinking, well, they can't be serious. This is a child. Maybe they're just doing this for attention. And this is the time to say, you know what, you always have to take your child seriously. You really have to really listen and really observe what you're seeing and hearing and not just put the blinders on and say, there's no way this child could do this. There's no way my family member can do this.
Dr. Colin King, I know you worked on this case. What can you tell us tonight?
Vinny, time doesn't permit me to go into the nuances of this case. As you know, I spent about 24, 25 hours evaluating him, seeing him more than 6 times. I've never met his parents, but I've met his parents through my interview with him. And there's a lot of information that we may not be aware of. First of all, the community of Oxford is a gun community, which means that it's not unusual for parents to purchase guns for their children and take them out to the driving range and shoot guns. It's just a thing that they do. I'm not making excuses for them, but I also want to say that the parents themselves, based on my interview with him, seem to have their own mental health issues. So what we have here is a whole dysfunctional system. The parents having their own issues. We have this young man whom I spent a lot of time with having severe mental health issues. And then we have the school system seeing warning signs. And I have my own thoughts about, what they should have done. So this was just like a perfect storm waiting to happen.
Okay, everyone stay where you are. We've got some more to go through here. We're going to talk about some other parents as well. Ruby Franke, how about her? How about Aiden Fucci's parents? Don't go anywhere.
This is Alex Murdoch. My wife and child got badly.
On the premiere episode of an all-new Court TV true crime series.
This case was unlike a normal murder case.
It's official that they're dead? No father could do that to his son. No Murdoch could do it to a Murdoch.
He has a long history of deception.
Once I told a lie,
the roads all came back to LA.
I had to keep lying.
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rollins. Premieres Sunday night, 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
Hear over and over and over again that door locking and unlocking, because the evidence is going to show that that room was not a room that he could come and go from as he pleased. He was locked inside from the outside over and over again for long periods of time. For mass majority of this child's life, he's in that room. In no circumstance is this a productive punishment for any child. This is the worst possible thing that a parent could do.
Or is it? We're taking a look at some things that in stories we're covering right now, in cases and trials involving some very bad parental choices that are made. That case, the Ferriters, it's the box in the garage. Let's take a listen to the 911 call from the case involving YouTube momfluencer Ruby Franke and her child who escapes from her friend's house. Take a listen.
Tell me exactly what's happened.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help. And he's said he just came from a neighbor's house, and we know there's been problems at this neighbor's house. He's emaciated, he's got tape around his legs, he's hungry, and he's thirsty. He has duct tape around each ankle. Yeah, there's sores around him. I think there's a good chance he's been...
He also said...
Oh, and he has been around his ankles. I mean, his wrists as well. Okay, this boy has been... This kid has obviously been... I think he's been detained. He's obviously covered in wounds.
Let's bring back in our guests, Sharonda Brown, Dr. Colin King, Dr. Judy Ho, and Dr. Carol Lieberman. Sharonda Brown, looking at this case, we're talking about two situations here, right? You've got the Ferriters who are, I guess, locking their son up. Here you've got an allegation that Ruby Franke and her friend who she's staying with are somehow restraining and detaining this young boy. This stuff, I don't understand any scenario where any of this would be appropriate under any circumstances. Sharonda?
None of it is appropriate. We got to think about where abuse comes from. Yes. I'm here.
We just have a little bit of a
Can you hear
delay,
me?
so
I'm
it's
here.
going to totally mess us up, but go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was saying we have to think about where abuse comes from. Abuse is a obsession with control and power, and ultimately that will create a system of abuse, and that becomes addictive. So a lot of people are addicted to having control and power and ultimately becoming abusive. So when they're locking people up, it becomes extremely empowering to where they do it over and over again. And let's say that they're being rewarded for this, and over time, no one has said anything, no one is seeing anything wrong with what they're doing. They will become more and more empowered to where it gets beyond controllable. And I think this is what we're seeing here. The abuse has gotten beyond control because people are feeling more empowered and they're getting more fame from it. They're getting more attention from it. This woman had millions and millions of followers. And so I'm sure that that was pretty empowering and that made her feel very inflated with her sense of self. And when you think about the type of personalities that a lot of people who are abusive come with, it definitely is like an ego complex, a God complex, to which they are saying, okay, here are people who are weaker than me, smaller than me, that I can increase pain in. And it's definitely rewarded on some level for as long as it goes on. And I think this is what we're seeing with both of these parents.
Dr. Carol Liederman, I want to talk about the Oxford school shooter parents who, after the shooting was over and the alerts were sent out to parents, Jennifer knew something was up. She started screaming, told her husband to go check for the gun, and sends a text to her son saying, don't do it. Then you've got Aiden Fucci and his parents. Aiden Fucci murdered a 13-year-old classmate, Tristan Bailey. Horrific. And then afterwards, we've got the surveillance video of Aiden Fucci's mom cleaning up the bloody pants. And she's been prosecuted for all of that. You know, looking at the way parents react to these situations, what does it tell us about parents? Is this a sign of love? You know, not trying to get your kids in trouble, cleaning up the evidence, or trying to sweep under the rug that your son has issues?
Well, first of all, with what are you talking about with Aiden Fucci? You know, it's unclear how much the mother knew when she was doing that, but kind of just like Ethan Crumbley, really, deep down she did know that there was something wrong with him and that he was capable of committing murder. And you know, the Crumbleys, I just want to say that is it's about time that parents are punished criminally for what their children do, like particularly school shooters. And this is a great case for them to set a precedent, because there are so many years, so many instances, so much evidence of what they've done to him all his life, from leaving him alone in the house without a phone and going away and drinking and going to their horses and just totally ignoring him, to not taking him that day when they were told to take him to a psychiatrist or to a hospital. They didn't do it. They left him. I mean, there are so many things that form a list that really, I think that case is going to finally. It's finally going to be one where it sets a precedent, which is there are so many school shooters where there are parents who have been responsible, maybe not with such a long list of things that they did wrong, but if more parents were held responsible, there would be fewer school shooters.
I agree 1,000%. It's getting that responsibility under the law, but we'll see with this case. Dr. Judy Ho, Sharonda pointed out at the top of the hour that when we were talking about the Crumbleys and the Ferriters, these are two extreme cases, right? And I'm looking at it, I'm saying, what does it tell us about the parents, the ones that do too much and the ones that don't do enough or don't do anything? What does that tell us about the parents and the problems that these parents have and the way they're reacting to these circumstances?
Well, we're talking about the two extremes, Vinny, doing way too much and going overboard, and then maybe tapping into even a statistic part of yourself that might have existed and maybe you didn't even recognize until all of this started happening. And then once the abuse starts, you actually start to feel empowered. You actually start to feel somehow good. There's a high there. And some people don't even realize that that's part of their personality and their constitution until something like this happens, when a situation presents itself. And then there's the parents who don't do enough, and they say, well, this is not my problem, or I can't deal with it anymore. I have my own problems, right? And unfortunately, when you become a parent, your first priority is not yourself anymore. Your first priority is this other human being whose life you are in charge of. And if you can't do that, it's best to say, you know what, I need to find another home for this person, whether it's your biological child or it's a child that you adopted, or you're part of the foster system and you're a foster parent and you started with good intentions. There has to be some kind of self-acknowledgement and self-understanding that you can't handle this anymore, or you're starting to do really bad things and you got to let it go. And I think that these parents' priorities just may not have been in the right place.
Great discussion. Incredible insight tonight. Sharonda Brown, Dr. Colin King, Dr. Judy Ho, Dr. Carol Lieberman. We're out of time, but I'm sure this conversation will continue. Thank you all so much.